The year is 399 BCE, and the great city of Athens, the cradle of democracy, is on the brink of change. A city of philosophers, poets, and artists where democracy was born is now facing internal struggles that threaten its very foundation. But among these turbulent times, there stood one figure who, by his actions and ideas, would change the course of history forever. Socrates, perhaps the greatest of all philosophers, a man who defined the very essence of philosophy itself, was now standing at the edge of life and death, awaiting a fate most men would shudder to face. Born around 470 BCE, Socrates was no ordinary man. He wasn't a king or warrior, but a thinker. A man who saw the world through the lens of questions. The man who would become a household name across the ages wasn't known for wielding a sword, but for wielding a dialectic, an unyielding pursuit of truth through questioning. In the heart of Athens, he wandered the agora, the marketplace, engaging with anyone willing to converse. From powerful statesmen to humble craftsmen, Socrates asked the same fundamental question. What is truth? What is justice? What is virtue? He believed in the power of knowledge, but more importantly, the power of asking the right questions. His method, famously known as the Socratic method, involved asking a series of probing questions designed to reveal contradictions in people's beliefs and provoke deeper thinking. However, it was this relentless questioning, his refusal to accept the status quo, that would ultimately seal his fate. It was in 399 BCE that Socrates found himself standing trial in front of a jury of his fellow Athenians. He was accused of two serious charges: impiety, failing to recognize the gods of the city, and corrupting the youth with his ideas. Charges were heavy, and the consequences were clear: death. But as the trial began, Socrates did not beg for mercy or try to evade his fate. He stood his ground. He did not view the gods as the Athenian citizens did. He saw the divine as something greater than what the state had defined, and for that, he was seen as dangerous. He did not bow to political power, nor did he fear the wrath of the authorities. His ideas were revolutionary, and Athens was not ready for them. He famously declared, "I do not fear death. I only fear not living a life of integrity, not doing the right thing." In his final days, Socrates found himself in a prison cell, awaiting the execution that would come for him, not by the sword or by the hand of an executioner, but through poison. He was to drink a cup filled with hemlock, a slow-acting poison. That would eventually bring him death. But Socrates was not a man to accept death in the same way most would. For Socrates, death was not an enemy. It was not a finality to fear. Instead, it was a transition, a journey into the next world, a place where the soul would be freed from the confines of the body, liberated to continue its pursuit of truth. He had spent his life questioning the very foundations of Athens, its laws, its customs, and most importantly, its understanding of truth and justice. And in his final moments, Socrates would teach his most profound lesson. In his prison cell, Socrates was surrounded by his friends and disciples, the men and women who had followed him for years. Among them was Plato, his most faithful student, who would later go on to become one of the greatest philosophers of all time. Plato, who would preserve Socrates' teachings for posterity, was there to witness his master's final moments. Despite the impending death, Socrates was at peace. He was calm and composed, as if in the presence of the very truths he had sought all his life. And yet, for his disciples, the moment was heart-wrenching. "My friends, I'm not afraid of what is to come. I do not fear death, for I believe that the soul is immortal. Death is but the separation of the soul from the body, and if we are wise, we will see it not as an end, but as a new beginning." As Socrates spoke, his disciples sat quietly, their hearts heavy with grief. They knew that their teacher was not just talking about death, he was talking about life itself. He was urging them to understand that true wisdom was not just in the pursuit of knowledge, but in the acceptance of life and death as part of the same journey. Then, in a quiet moment, the cup was brought to Socrates. It was filled with hemlock, the poison that would soon end his life. As he took the cup in his hands, he looked at it with the same calm expression he had worn through all his years of questioning. The poison was not his enemy. It was simply a step in the inevitable journey to the next world. Now let us drink to the truth, for the truth is eternal, and death is merely another part of it." With those final words, Socrates drank from the cup. His disciples watched in silence, knowing that this moment would become a part of history. As the poison began to take effect, Socrates lay down, his body slowly giving way to the toxin. But his mind remained clear and resolute. Socrates died on that day in 399 BCE. His body, exhausted by the poison, gave way to death. But his soul, according to his beliefs, was free to continue its journey, unfettered by the constraints of the human body. His final lesson had been taught not in words, but in action. His disciples, though heartbroken, would carry his teachings with them forever. Plato, who was present at Socrates' death, would go on to immortalize his teacher's ideas in his dialogues. And it is through Plato, through these writings, that the world came to know Socrates as the father of Western philosophy. But the death of Socrates was not just the end of a philosopher's life. It was the beginning of a new era, an era of intellectual awakening, of questioning, of seeking. The ideas Socrates presented would challenge not just Athens, but the entire world. In the years following his death, Socrates' influence spread far beyond the walls of Athens. His commitment to questioning authority, his relentless search for truth, and his belief in the importance of virtue and knowledge became the foundation for future generations of philosophers. Plato's works, Aristotle's teachings, and the entire tradition of Western philosophy owe their existence to Socrates' courage to speak the truth, even in the face of death. And so the legacy of Socrates lives on today. His thoughts continue to shape the way we understand ethics, politics, knowledge, and the very essence of what it means to live a meaningful life. So as we go about our lives today, we must ask ourselves, how can we embody the spirit of Socrates in our own lives? How can we pursue wisdom relentlessly without fear of what others may think or say? How can we learn to embrace death not as an enemy, but as part of the inevitable cycle of existence? Socrates taught us that the search for truth is the most important pursuit a human being can undertake. He showed us that by questioning everything, even our own beliefs and assumptions, we can unlock a deeper understanding of the world. He showed us that true wisdom is not in knowing all the answers, but in knowing how to ask the right questions. And in the end, he showed us that death, far from being an end, is simply a transition, a continuation of the journey of the soul. And as long as we live with integrity, with purpose, and with wisdom, our souls will continue their journey long after we are gone. Socrates may have died in that prison cell, but his spirit lives on in every question we ask, in every search for truth, and in every act of wisdom. Let us carry forward his legacy, just as his disciples did, and continue to seek the answers to life's greatest questions. For in the end, as Socrates himself said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the life and death of Socrates. I hope this story inspired you to think more deeply about life, wisdom, and the pursuit of truth. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our future exploration. Every subscription helps us bring you more of these meaningful stories. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeking the truth.